Hi, I'm Daniel, and I'm the creator of the YouTube channel, the Scandi Flick. I'm a photographer with a passion for riding ATV bikes, and on the Scandi Flick, I combine the two passions and make adventure riding films.
Welcome to the Real Riders Podcast. My name's Simon Josie, and if this is your first time here, welcome and thanks for listening. The YouTube channel, the Scandi Flick, was established in October 2023, and on the 11th of December, coincidentally on the same day that the Real Riders Podcast was launched, and exactly a year ago if you're listening to this episode on the day it's published, the first video was posted to the channel. It was a 1 minute 35 second teaser for the video Portugal Sea to Summit on the TET and ACT full ADV tour documentary. The full documentary was then published to the channel on the 26th of December. Daniel Stjerne, my guest today, is the creative force behind the Scandi Flick, and since the channel started, he has released long-form films based on ADV rides in Sweden, the Balkans, as well as the Portugal film just mentioned. Anyone who has seen Daniel's videos will have noted the extremely high production values with which they are created. The channel has been on my radar for most of this year, so I was very keen to talk to Daniel about his filmmaking. I must give a shout out to former guest Nick Jacobs, also known as Project Biker on YouTube and Instagram, who helped connect me with Daniel and, I assume, put in a good word on behalf of the podcast. Before we jump into my interview with Daniel, I want to mention that I have brought the podcast's Blue Sky account out of hibernation and started posting there again. My main motivation for doing this is that I wanted an additional social media channel that is, shall we say, better suited for predominantly text-based posts. Contrast this with Instagram, which is, as everyone knows, predominantly a platform for sharing photos and short videos. Oh, and if you're wondering, I haven't changed my approach to Instagram. I'll continue to post there in the manner to which you've become accustomed. That is, if you follow the Real Riders Podcast account on Instagram. As always, if you have the time and inclination, please consider rating or liking the Real Riders Podcast in your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. This will help other listeners find the podcast. Righto, let's get to my talk with Daniel. Welcome to the podcast, Daniel, and thanks for being my guest today. How are you?
Thank you very much, Simon. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm doing really good. I'm currently just chilling in my house at night. Kids are in bed and I walked the dog already, so I'm excited to be here.
Great. So as we record this, I believe you're just back from a trip riding in Portugal. In the first film that you published to your YouTube channel, that film was called Portugal Sea to Summit on the TET and ACT. You mentioned a desire to return to Portugal and one day complete the full TET. Is that what you've just done?
I did just come back from Portugal, which was an amazing trip. Unfortunately, the weather wasn't quite as good as it was last time. We had a little bit more of an overcast, but the riding nonetheless was really epic, as always with Portugal, with the varied amount of tracks there is everywhere. I didn't complete the full TET, absolutely not. That would probably, in my opinion, take somewhere between 2 and 3 weeks. The Portuguese TET is really technical at some sections, at least. Down south, supposedly, I haven't been there. It's more in resemblance to the ACT, so not as tricky and not as enduro-like tracks. But as you get more into the more rural areas of Portugal, it is very, very rugged and it's very steep and it's very technical. So I think you'd be very pleased with yourself if you did 150 kilometers on one day. Between 100 and 150 is probably what I would estimate. And I think the entire TET is somewhat like, is it 1,200, 1,300 kilometers or something in Portugal probably. So it's a bit of a project to take on to do the full thing.
Yeah, I seem to remember from the first video, you said that you would want to be doing about 200 kilometers a day and it would probably take about 12 days. So obviously you've revised your estimates a little bit.
Yeah, Probably it's even more than, if I'm not mistaken, probably closer to 2,000 kilometers then.
Yeah.
No, but we did manage to ride parts of the TED, which I hadn't done before. But we were actually riding more coastal tracks this time. And the TED doesn't really go that close to the coast. It goes more inland towards, not near Spain, but definitely more in the middle and towards Spain than towards the coast. Because it's more isolated there. There's less people you can annoy. There's more really small little tracks you can find everywhere. So, but yeah, we rode mostly this time closer to the coast at least, which was very spectacular. And we did manage to find some very, very tough tracks, even though we were actually at the coast. So even though the weather was a little bit disappointing for when you come from Scandinavia and you think, oh, I'm going to go to Portugal in October and it's going to be sunny and shiny and perfect. But it wasn't very warm. It was mostly overcast. We had a little bit of rain. We also had some sunshine, but yeah, overall, just a fantastic, one of my absolute favorite countries to visit, to ride ADV bikes for sure.
And were you filming this latest trip?
I always try to bring my camera and then see what happens, basically. Filming a trip depends a lot on the synergy with the group that you're riding with. Do you know each other well enough that people will let down their guards and actually be able to be themselves on camera? And is there a good kind of chemistry between the people that's in there? Now, I was there with Johannes, which I've been traveling with before. Ingvar was also with Portugal and also in the Balkans. So I knew for a fact that at least we were going to be able to create something that could be really good between the three of us. There was also a lot of other people riding there in the groups. So yes, I did bring my camera and hopefully down the line it's going to be a film one day. Right now I'm between my day job as a photographer and trying to balance that life with also trying to make some quite lengthy films on YouTube, which is very demanding. Yeah, right now I'm just focusing on finishing the project that we did this summer, which was the Balkans.
Funny you mentioned this filming the group ride, because it's become quite a recurring theme on the podcast. I seem to be asking the question often, and it seems those people who do make films riding motorcycles, they know it's a big issue. I was somewhat amused to see that I think Robert from Nomad Sweden, he made a comment on one of your videos saying, hey, well done for getting all your guys to stop, wait for you to set the camera up, etc.
Exactly, yeah, he did.
And it's like, these are the people who know what it's like, who really appreciate how much effort goes on to capture, and particularly the group ride. Yeah.
Not only for me, but also everyone else who was involved. I mean, it was an issue. We were riding the Balkans this summer, and especially two of the guys kind of has the mindset, we want to ride as much as possible. So whenever I'm like, oh, let's stop here and let's film a little bit, and even though, in the morning they said, yeah, do it all, stop, say whenever you want to stop and film, we'll do it. We'll be happy to make some film. And yeah, that's cool. But I can just tell that there's a limit to what the patients from their end can actually take on, because they come there to do the ride, and I do the same thing. It's not, I've made one film that was more of a setup, and it was just a 1 day of filming, 1 day of riding, and everything was kind of planned, and so we're going to ride this route. It was only 50 kilometers. And that was kind of the intent of that day. But everything else that I've ever put out is basically just from a trip, and then trying to find the stories within the trip and try and piece it together afterwards, because I have no idea what I'm doing when I'm doing there. I'm not directing anybody to do, oh, let's have fun here. And if you say something like this, or it's just really, it's a very authentic experience doing it. And then hopefully there's going to be some material from it when you get home and you can piece a film together from it.
Yeah. Okay, so the Scandi Flick appeared as a YouTube channel less than a year ago in December last year, 2023. And to date, you've published 8 videos plus a sort of a similar number of YouTube shorts. For anyone not familiar with the channel, so far the content consists of long-form films plus a couple of trailers associated with those films. And this is concerning trips that you've made to Portugal before, and to Sweden a couple of times, and also the Balkans, as you mentioned. Tell us, why did you create the channel in the first place? What was your sort of original concept for it?
That's a good question. It was sort of it was a spur of the moment, I think you call it. I started riding ADV bikes. I bought my T7 in June 2022. So that's a little bit more than 2 years now. And I was quite lucky to get in contact with Johannes, and we spoke a little bit. Johannes has a YouTube channel as well, Johannes Dalen. I should, of course, mention that. But I was lucky enough to get to speak with Johannes Dalen, and we sort of texted about if we should do a ride at one point, and then he ended up inviting me to the Portugal trip, which was November last year. And I was more than thrilled to be able to go to Portugal. That was an amazing experience and something that I really wanted to try and go to ride somewhere else than Sweden, because before that was basically the ADV riding experience I had was within a few hours from my home here in Copenhagen, which is Sweden. And I brought my little GoPro Hero 8, and I brought a little analog camera, and I just wanted to make some still photography there to kind of have that as a memory. But I also just kept pushing record on my GoPro. And when I came home, I just got it in. I tried to piece a little bit together just to have it for myself. And I kind of just felt like, oh, this is a quite interesting story. And then I tried to piece some more in, and then I tried to add some background music. And then before I knew it, I was like, okay, this could actually, if I really try and put an effort into this footage that I've done with the GoPro Hero 8, I can actually maybe try and put something together. And at least for me, it will be a fantastic memory from the trip, and probably also for the other guys that was riding with us on that trip. So I did that. And then I just decided, why don't I just make a YouTube channel and see what that could kind of bring to it. So it was not planned. I didn't have any idea that I wanted to try and pursue anything within YouTube. It was just a spur of the moment kind of idea. Let's make a YouTube channel. I'll make this video as good as I can. And I popped it up there. And today I think it has 21,000 views, which is pretty okay for the first video you ever put up on YouTube.
Definitely.
And the people that I was riding with was really thrilled and happy to see that, the memory of that trip as well, being visualized in that sense. Because even though Johannes is a YouTuber, he's at the moment, and even since then, he kind of stopped making travel videos. He stopped doing YouTube mostly. So there wasn't any other kind of reportage from that trip. So people were very happy both to have the analog still photography, but also the little film I put together from down there. So so that was how it started. It wasn't a plan. For me, it's I've been working as a photographer for 12 years. So for me, it's kind of an unknown step to try and put myself out there. It was something that I'm not quite sure that I still feel comfortable with. I have a personal Instagram account for my work, and which is in a completely different field of photography. So I never post any material from the Scandi Flick on my personal account. It's two separate things. And I try to keep it separate in that way because it's just two separate worlds that doesn't really collide very well. So I just keep them completely separate, and it's easier for me in that way to manage that. So yeah.
Okay, it's coming up to a year almost. It will be in December. Mm-hmm. Have you changed your sort of ambitions for the YouTube channel at all, or do you think you're just going to keep trucking on in a similar vein that you've done so far?
Well, that's the good thing about having a good day job, where you can kind of take it as you want. I'm definitely never going to put myself in a position where I'm going to be forcing myself to be pursuing a YouTube career. I couldn't imagine going through maybe a tough time in your life and still you would I need to be on there. I need to promote myself. I need to do this and that, and I need to make more content. I need to keep my subscribers happy. And that's a different game for somebody else who has a different patience. For me, it's purely a hobby, and as with hobbies go, I might finish off after the Balkans and just, I can't be bothered anymore, and then in a year or so I get the appetite again. But for now, I'm really happy with trying to evolve in making videos. I'm still a complete rookie in making videos, in my opinion. There's so many things I want to learn about planning to shoot the films. I want to be better at structuring them so it's easier to kind of know what you're getting home when you're done with the shoot, and also be better to not search for the stories within the hours and hours and hours of content that you have to make, but be better at trying to have a story ready so you can fine tune it more. I would love to do some films that were even more just focused on the pure aspect of storytelling, where it's not about a documentary trip from anything. It's this is just purely something that is meant to be visually entertaining and tell a great story. And that could be a 10-minute short documentary about a subject that I found really interesting, and then really trying to and develop that. So there's many options to still pursue, and I'm very happy with what it gives me at the moment, but I'm also very happy that I'm in a situation where I can take it or leave it.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that you'd be quite keen to sort of delve a little more deeply into the whole process. I mean, what I notice, having watched your films, is enormous progress made from the first to the second one. So I'm talking about particularly the beginning sequences of the 2 Sweden trips and also the breathtaking Balkans. Tremendous ambition, I would say, particularly that first Sweden one where you're bringing the bike out. You've obviously done a lot of coverage, so different. I mean, I assume you're only working with one camera, so you're doing a lot of setup and capturing a lot of different angles to tell that story visually. I thought was extremely professional, and the kind of thing that I've seen other Scandinavians like Thomas Hansen do.
Absolutely,
just really structured, very planned out, very deliberate, and it really made me sit up and go, wow, this is a big step up from the first film, for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. But I think it's a natural progression, because from the first film, as I mentioned, I was basically going to Portugal with a GoPro Hero 8, and that was it. I didn't think about anything in regarding of planning any shots or anything. So I think once you have the idea and the planning goes into it, then you can much easily get that kind of overview of a project and say, okay, this could be told by this. And then you can sort of test it out. That didn't work. But it's a different kind of game trying to document a trip, because it's never going to be only you. Not for my trips, at least. That wouldn't be very entertaining or interesting, I think, if I just went on a trip on my own and tried to tell that story. But in a different situation, it's of course a lot easier just to control the elements and the time schedule when it's just me that's the subject for it, basically. So
yeah. Tell me, was the first film, the first trip to Portugal, was that the first film you had edited before? The reason I ask is, when I first started playing around with video cameras and editing, I realized that it was the editing that actually taught me a lot about, these are the kind of shots I need. This is what I'm missing. These are the things I need. Did you have a sort of similar revelation when you came back and started editing that first film?
No, I think editing film for me has been something that I've been tingling with throughout my professional career. I do only still photography as a professional photographer, but I've directed a few music videos. I've shot some different commercials, some different stuff in film format. So it's not my first time in an editing software. But I definitely agree with you. If it's a brand new game for you, then it is an eye-opening experience to try and edit videos and see how much you can actually edit out and edit in and squeeze together and mix around, and then sort of package it all together in a completely different story that you probably didn't think about. So it's a great learning experience, the editing process of future projects. In throughout all the years in my career, I kind of see it as you have a backpack full of knowledge, and the more you work at it, the more sort of things you can easily pull out this backpack and say, this would work for this could work for this. Oh, I did this once, and then I can do that again for this. So the more experience, of course, the better you get at it, and the more efficient you'll also be at it. And that backpack just sort of grows and grows and grows. And that's just, it's a very helpful to have a lot of different tools that you can sort of pull out in situations where you can, that could kind of work for this situation, or maybe if we try and angle it like this, it could be better. So definitely, yeah.
Mm. In the YouTube world, it's perhaps a little bit unusual to focus on what I would describe as long form content. And okay, I guess what I'm talking about is anything more than 30 minutes long. Okay, but that's what you've done, and I can sort of guess why. But maybe in your own words, can you just explain why you have taken that path to sort of focus on the long form? Even in the Breathtaking Balkans, which is serialized, it's still long form episodes. Yeah,
55 minutes up till now. Yeah, the two at the time of recording 2 episodes that's out now. That's 55 minutes, and I'll definitely try and keep the same length and format. And I'm not really too bothered if it's too long for the YouTube format. This is the pace that I'm comfortable at telling a story, and I can definitely learn and become better at being more sharp and being more straight to the bone in some situations. But yeah, the long format for me is definitely more interesting. I also tend to, if I have a list with films that I really enjoy from having watched on YouTube, and none of them are 8 minutes long, from somebody who cuts like it's Mr. Beast every 2 seconds per cut, or I don't find enjoyment in that kind of format. I mean, I think it's also mirrored in my taste in what I like to watch in films that has nothing to do with ADV writing. I mean, regular feature films. I love films that takes its time to develop and build up characters without saying too much. And so I think that's just more my taste, and that's the only thing I can make videos from. I can't really watch a YouTube guide saying, oh, you can't have clips that's more than 2 seconds or 5 seconds long because people will get bored. You have to be talking all the time because otherwise they'll lose contact and they'll fast forward. I don't want to be a YouTuber. I just want to try and make films as I like them. And I'm not saying that it couldn't be better because I'm quite new at this, so I'm not trying to be cocky or anything about it. I'm just trying to make them as I feel is a good format. And up till now, that's been the lengthy format. I did post one very recently, yesterday, a few days ago, 4 minutes long, just a little snippet that I put out there. And that is, to me, also interesting. But the format that I tend to see in YouTubers is the regular posts once or twice a week. It's a constant flow of speak. It's a constant flow of clips. It's a constant flow of things happening all the time. And at the end of it, you've gone from A to B and you haven't really learned anything that much, and you're none the wiser, and you don't really have any feelings involved in it either. It skips through things too quickly. So for me, yeah, it's just more appealing to see these long format YouTube films, for sure. Absolutely.
I was somewhat amused at the end of the first film. You actually apologized for not killing your babies.
Yeah, darlings, basically. I used to call it darlings. Babies sounds a little bit...
Yeah, if anyone doesn't know, it's sort of a term that's used. I don't know if it's only used in the filmmaking world, but it's basically where you might have created or captured an amazing shot, and you go, "Oh, I've got to have this in because it's such a great shot." But if it actually doesn't do anything for the story, you should take it out, because really you should only be putting things in that contribute to the story. But why did you feel the need to apologize? Was it like, hey, I know not everyone's going to necessarily like this, but as you just said a few minutes ago, these are the kind of films that I want to make, and this is just me making the films that I want to make. Is that the right interpretation?
I think definitely it's a bit of a comment to this idea that a YouTube film has to be this Mr. Beast kind of production to be able to fit into what people want to see today. Everything you see on Instagram, on YouTube, that has tons and tons of views, is very hectic and it's very standardized to keep us hooked and not scream away without actually maybe evoking so many emotions with us. And also a statement kind of made like "kill your darlings" is basically an expression made for, as you said, optimizing the final product. It might be one of your greatest shots that you've ever made, but it doesn't really fit in here, so let's get rid of it. And "kill your darlings" is is definitely something that I'm aware of, but it was also more figuratively speaking in that film. Like I'm not here to make films to please the algorithm. I really like this shot for it. So for me, there was definitely some darlings that had to go out there for sure. But it's a kind of a comment to saying, okay, I made a video that's more than an hour and a half long, and it's my first YouTube video. I should probably have edited it down more if I wanted to become successful and had tons and tons of views. But that's not what I want to do. I want to make this film as I see fit. And that's what I did. So yeah, probably that's a comment in that sort of, mindset.
One of the most striking things about your films is how they look. I mean, they ooze a cinematic quality, which I'm sure is very deliberate. And it's no surprise to hear that you're a photographer. Can you explain how you achieve that look? You know, your entire workflow, starting with the cameras that you use all the way through to what you're doing in post-production, especially to achieve a consistency across a whole, production, how to get that precise look, which is very specific, I think, to your work.
Absolutely. It's not a coincidence. And of course, that comes of my trade as being a photographer, especially a still photographer, because still photography is one image. And basically, in my line of work, I may shoot 30 images in one day. And they might be shot at different types of light, different types of location. But still, at the end of the day, it has to be one homogeneous kind of presentation of images. So that's just my training, I think, to try and modulate and piece together something that is visually coherent. For my specific taste, is definitely also affecting the image output from the channel. I like to see warm images. I like to see saturated-ish images, but still within a tonality that is to the slightly warmer side. So I kind of set my cameras to a warmer white balance than an auto white balance. Which gives the image a little bit of a warmer tint, I find, especially in the GoPro images and all the action camera images. To me, that completely neutral look is absolutely boring and not very inspiring to look at. And I still struggle with trying to grade GoPro footage, even though I try to shoot it in, I can't remember what the log format of a GoPro camera is, but whatever log they have available, and then I edit everything myself to try and make it look as much as possible as pleasing to me. Again, within the realism of this is shot over 2 weeks. There's probably hundreds and hundreds of clips that's been shot in different light and different situations. I would say I think it's quite coherent, but still, if I had the time, it would be even more kind of tuned in. Right now, I'm editing the episode 3 for the Balkans trip. And what I kind of have done for this trip is to try and make it episodial, but still trying to invite people in that hasn't seen it before. I keep the intro the same for all the videos, but then I change the clips, basically. And when you take this footage from 1 hour of film, and then you see them in one long stretch, then it's quite hard to tell, is there a difference from 20 minutes ago, or does it look the same right now? But when you take 5 seconds or 2 seconds from each of those clips and put them together, then it's quite easy to tell, okay, this is too red, this is too warm, this is too cold, this is too contrasty, this is too soft. Besides the fact that I think it helps to tell the story, to have the intro kind of give a little preview of what's about to come in this episode, then it also is a guide for me to kind of see, is my color grading properly done, or do I need to tweak it or make it a little bit better here and there, within the realms of reality that this is a side project that I do, and it's a 1 hour film, and it takes a very long time already to try and edit it, and I need to be able to look after my kids and walk my dog once in a while as well. So.
For sure. And are you shooting log with your, I mean, what camera are you using apart from the GoPros?
So I'm using a GoPro 12 now. I'm only using one. I did try and have a setup where I had one camera filming me and one camera filming from my helmet. I didn't really like it. It's nice to have the different angles, and maybe it's something that I'll do again. But as of this moment, I'm just using a GoPro 12 for the helmet camera, the action camera stuff. And then I'm using a Canon R5, which is my everyday camera that I use for my job. I have a little bit of like some ND filters and stuff for the Canon camera. So it's easier to expose at a very low aperture, because that's the key feature for me to be able to shoot at a low aperture to get that shallow depth of field in the frame. Whenever I'm using the R5, it's the one thing that the GoPro camera really lacks, and that's the depth of field. Because the quality is actually there, the amount of pixels is there, but the depth of field is just so flat. And since it's such a small sensor camera, it's also lacking different types of. I often find that if you ride in a forest and then there's sunshine coming in, but there's also really harsh shadows, the GoPro can't really figure that out. It's either too bright or too dark in some areas of the film. And a larger sensor camera like my R5 pulls that off without any problems. But I'm just not able to strap my R5 to my helmet and keep that recording all the time, because the files it puts out it's also quite a hefty size file. So even though the actual resolution of the file is the same as on the GoPro, actually higher even on the GoPro.
And you're shooting in log on the R5, is that right?
Yes, everything is shot on log, because that's the only way for me to try and be somewhat satisfied with the grading of the footage afterwards.
Right.
Absolutely. So everything is shot on log, and I don't use any. That's another thing you get bombarded with on YouTube and on Instagram. These packages where you can buy LUTs and different LUTs for warmth and different for cold, and they're good to give you kind of a creative idea about how much you can push your images. But no matter how much they market it, it's not a one-off solution. One thing will not match the footage you've done because this is shot in a different way. So for me, I've basically made my own little gradings that I try to copy from one film to another, and then I adjust it. I don't use any LUTs specifically. I just convert the files from the log to the Rec 709, and then I do all the color grading after this.
And what lenses do you take for the R5 when you travel on these trips?
I only have one lens that I'm bringing, and that's a 24 to 70 millimeter lens. It's an f2.8, and that's for the full range. So you can go quite shallow depth on it. And if you go up to 70 millimeters of focal length on 2.8, you're going to have a really beautiful depth of field in it. But you're actually also able to shoot something. I never shoot something on 24 millimeters. I don't like wide angle. If I loved wide angle, I would just shoot on the GoPro.
Yeah.
I tend to shoot somewhere between 40 millimeters and 70 millimeters a lot on my R5. I would love to have a more telelens piece of glass for the R5 to really try and squeeze the landscape together sometimes. I think it gives a beautiful depth of field, and sometimes I think one of the biggest problems is that when you watch ADV films, wherever it is and whoever's making them, it looks 10 times less impressive on a GoPro camera and even on any sort of wide angle camera than it feels in real life.
Yeah.
But actually trying to use a focal length that is above 50 millimeters can help you squeeze the landscape together and give you a better perspective of the height difference that you're actually going through. So if I had a bit stronger shoulders, I would probably carry like a 70 to 200. But already at the moment, it's very limited what I can be able to bring of camera gear, because this is, for me, after all, just about the riding first and foremost. And then the film is kind of icing on the cake, and to try and be able to relive the experience again and again when I come home. But first and foremost, I'm in the Balkans to ride the Balkans and to have that experience. And if I'm bogged down with tons and tons of camera equipment, then it's a struggle, and then it ruins the experience for me to be there and ride those tracks.
Which is something that I've noticed. I haven't noticed any drone footage in the Balkan series, whereas you have included some drone footage in the Sweden shots previously. So is that for that specific reason that you didn't want to have to carry the drone on the Balkans trip because you were, riding light?
I actually did carry the drone all 3,000 kilometers of the Balkan trip, and I think I pulled it out twice. So, and luckily, it's the small one that only weighs 250 grams or whatever it is. So, but yeah, it's a time-consuming process shooting on the drone, especially if you're not really, really good at it. I'm not very good at it. And already, like, I'm one guy making a film, and we were in total 7 guys on that trip. And it needs to be not all about me, because also we actually do have a schedule. We need to ride from A to B to be able to get to that place tonight. And otherwise, we don't have a place to sleep. And so it's again, the trip is the key factor, and making the film is the second priority for me and for everybody else, of course, that's on that trip. And there simply wasn't any time to pull out the drone. Whenever we had a break, I pulled out the R5 and did some shots with that, because the R5 can capture emotions. The R5 can capture if you're struggling or if you're euphoric and you've had an amazing last 30 minutes, or if the last 30 minutes has been really shit, then you can get the emotions on the R5 and you can't get that on the drone. So it's a priority of like, this is the most important thing, and that's why I'm prioritizing. So I carried it in my backpack, and I had it out twice. I had it out a little bit at the end, again in Croatia. We took one day at the end where we're just chilling out at the beach, and I brought the drone out there. So 3 times in total in 2 weeks.
Right. Being somewhat audio focused myself, which is ironic given that this podcast is about filmmaking and motorcycles, people often talk to me and ask me about the whole issue of recording a group ride audio, the pack talk, I guess you could say. Now, I noticed, I think in the first 3 films, there's no pack talk recording. But tell me, I got the impression that in the Balkans trip or the Balkans series that you have been able to start recording the pack talk. Is that correct?
That is correct. I have a small lavalier mic that's connected or mounted next to my my Kato speaker. But the thing is that I have a tendency of not riding with my earplugs because my ears get quite sore. So the Kato volume is always quite low. And that means when I'm riding and getting the audio from the microphone really close to my mouth, then the volume settings of the speaker that is coming out of the Kato is not really loud enough, basically. So there is sound coming out of it. And if I am wearing earplugs, I can pull up the volume on the Kato completely, and then the sound is actually pretty okay. But it is something that I think is really important, and it brings so much more value to the GoPro shots and the action shots that you have that kind of connection with the people that's riding along with you. So it's something that I've been missing, and something that I didn't completely get as I wanted it on the Balkan trips, to tell you the truth. I was a bit disappointed. I had some problems, generally speaking, with sound. I also yanked out one of the lavalier cables to the GoPro. So without knowing, it was a recording for a full day without getting any sound at all, which was, of course, quite disappointing to figure out once you get back to the hotel and you turn on the GoPro and you just hear this little... But yeah, sound, of course, that's the one thing that I don't really have any professional knowledge about. And it's also always where I struggle with the speak of the film afterwards. I have extremely hard doing the recordings to my likings and how to set up the microphone. And I'm trying to be better at it. And yeah, you learn every day, and it's not a field that I'm really good in, but it's something that I really want to improve going forward.
Okay, a couple of things I want to pick up on there. First thing is, I am aware, though I have no experience, I'm just aware of the marketing material that actually the pack talk manufacturers, is it Kato and Sina? I think they're the 2 big ones. They actually now, I think, both have solutions to be able to record the whole pack ride. But I can't say whether it works well or not because I don't have any experience of that. Now, I know the method that you've used, I call it the Nomad Sweden method, because I think Robert had put out a video explaining how to do it.
Absolutely. I used Robert's. I completely copied everything of Robert's tutorial video that he posted up on YouTube.
Right. Yeah, well, Chris in Austria did the same thing. Nick and Beth, who are currently in Ecuador, I think, as we record this, they heard me talking about it at the Lightweight Adventure Festival earlier this year, and they've basically copied it. It all goes back to Robert. I take no credit for it. I'm just passing on the method. The second thing I wanted to come back to was that you mentioned that I think it was the second or third day of the Balkans trip where you lost the audio for the whole day. Actually, one of my favorite sequences in that second episode, it occurs around about 13 minutes where I think you guys may have hit some wet and quite tough terrain for the first time on that day. And you're really struggling through this quite dramatic sequence of video, and there's no noise, but there's no narration, there's just this music playing. And I don't know whether it's that particular music that you chose at that time, but I really like that sequence. And I wanted to ask you if you can remember that sequence as well and thought, oh, this really works really well without having the actual, the live audio, but just having the music and the visuals. It was really sort of added to the tension and drama rather than subtracted from it.
I think I remember the specific scene you're thinking about, but to me, no, it's an element that's lacking. I find that when it's probably a hard thing to describe, but it's like when you do the editing, if you just take one isolated thing from itself, it can feel quite useless. But once you try and add on the layers, so the background music, a bit of speak, and the edit and the color grading, and all the layers that you kind of stack up on it, brings it into another dimension than the specific flat format. I also have struggled a little bit at the moment with a piece of footage where it's not really fitting to put on background sound on it because there's too much speak, but it also is a little bit dull without anything. It's just a lot of dead sound in between the speak. And so for me, I struggle a little bit about adding the layers in every situation and finding out this works best for that. But I agree with you. It can be quite interesting to remove one element and really bring focus into something else, for sure. I don't remember the specific episode. I think I know which one it is, but I'm not 100% sure. But yeah.
Yeah, it just worked for me. Maybe because it was a change, I just remember and made a note of it. You mentioned narration just a minute ago, and I also want to point out that, of course, narration plays a very significant role in all your films. Now, I've previously said that I kind of like the absence of narration. Having said that, I've sort of come around to the idea that, well, actually, for most sort of documentary-style films, if you don't have a talking head, you kind of need narration to explain a little bit about what's going on. So you obviously put quite a lot of effort into the narration. At any time when you were starting to work on these videos, did you consider another approach? In other words, to not include narration, or was it just like a no-brainer? It has to be there for you.
To be quite honest, I would much rather be able to do something without narration. I would much rather be able to have video footage of people talking or being interviewed or talking on camera, and then not have the sound file of a narrator guiding you through the story. That would be my dream. If I had the production possibilities to do that and still tell the story of that trip and plan every day and saying, this is the story we need to talk about today, this is what we're going to tell today, then I would do it not in a single format where you shoot it into a GoPro microphone while you're driving and talking, but through conversations and through filming. That is probably where it feels the most raw documentary to me, filming from the trips, when you do interviews in the midst of something happening, instead of sitting at home afterwards and thinking, oh, this is a nice story. I can tell this story by narrating this and that into it. So for me, it's a necessary tool to kind of try and search for the stories afterwards and then try to modulate them into something that works for the film. To be quite honest, I would probably rather not have any narration and then just have the interview sections and the speak from the film. But it is absolutely necessary for the format that I'm able to produce it at this moment to have the narration, because I'm not able to plan the shoots enough to avoid having the narrator guiding you through what day is it, what's going to happen, where are we. So in a very long answer, I think it's very important for me as it is right now. I can't see a way out of having it, but when I look at the footage, the moment that I feel most pleased about some storytelling parts is when it's actually the person on camera telling the story, not necessarily me, but the people that I'm writing with that are telling this story. That's when it evokes the most emotions for me, because you can really feel the ups or downs in that sense, and not afterwards having done a script and then sitting at home and reading out the script and trying to do it in a voice that's inspiring. And
nothing beats the realistic performance of capturing the real thing in the moment. You know, no matter how hard you try, it's still relatively easy to pick out something that's been rehearsed as opposed to something that is genuinely a real moment being captured.
Absolutely. I was actually listening to a podcast today with a podcast format that I really, really like, Tim Hartford's Cautionary Tales. And today he had an episode with a writer of a novel, which was obviously scripted. You can just tell that the two people speaking together in a podcast, that it was completely scripted and they hadn't been in the same room when they did it. And that kind of breaks the romantic idea for me a little bit, because I love his podcast usually because it's always very raw and very real, and you have real people with real emotions and they're telling stories. But yeah, so I absolutely agree with that. It's the most pure form of documenting and provoking a feeling with others is to be able to show it in the moment and not being read out and scripted. And that's the same thing with the narration for the video. It always becomes a little bit. I'm definitely not good at it. There are definitely people that are very good at stuff like that, but that's not the strongest suit for me.
Everyone I talk to says they find it very difficult, and they also say they're terrible. And I always feel they're never quite as bad as they say they are. So what kind of riding interests you these days? I know that you did some motocross when you were much younger, but is it just the ADV riding, or do you do any sort of other riding?
I don't do any other riding than ADV riding right now. I would love to do enduro riding and go and be able to use a small bike, 120, 125 kilograms, and do some really, really tough tracks. I would absolutely love to do that. The problem for me is I live in Copenhagen and there's no tracks near here, and I don't have a garage, I don't have a trailer, it's just an equipment piece that I can't really stack up together right now and make to fit my lifestyle. But I would love to be able to do some more enduro riding, because it would help me immensely when we go on the longer ADV travel trips. It's a special feeling that you kind of meet an obstacle and then you kind of feel unequipped for it. You get a weird sensation in your body, and you get anxious and you get, how am I possibly going to go through this? And when you're riding enduro, riding on smaller bikes, you get over that kind of mental aspect of it much easier, because you do it all the time. You do climbs you didn't think was going to be possible on that little bike. And once you kind of mentally has gone through that on a smaller bike, it's going to be easier to meet whatever challenge you do meet on a bigger bike. In Portugal, I would definitely say riding a smaller bike, the Honda CRF 300 with better suspension, gives you so much more confidence to have a bike that's 140 kilograms instead of having like my T7 that's almost 200 kilograms. You just get a nervous feeling every time you get an obstacle that is a little bit above your pay grade, to say it like that. But if you do meet obstacles like this on a smaller bike, then you relax more and you're less hesitant about actually committing to this obstacle you have to do. And that's very, very good training and something that I would love to be able to do more. But as of right now, it's not really possible for me where I live. The best thing for me would to go to Sweden and go to ride an enduro track there. But since I'm from Denmark and you need a national license to be able to ride enduro, then it's not possible for me to go to Sweden and ride enduro. I would need to have a license and be a member of a club here in Denmark. And then I would need to get one-time licenses every time I was in Sweden to do that. So it's a bit complicated to try and take part in these formats, because you need licenses to do it. But I would love to be able to do it more, to be honest.
Have you considered trials riding or trying any trials? Because I hear a lot of off-road riders say it's, even if you don't want to become a trials rider, it's such good training for your ADV riding.
One of the best people in the world for many, many years was Graham Jarvis, and he's a former trials rider. Paul Torres, which everybody in the ADV world know, he was a former trials rider. It gives you skills and bike control that will help you immensely, but with whatever situation you'll end up in. It's not something that is appealing to me in the same way. It's a little bit too, I'm not sure what it is. I've done a lot of mountain biking as well, and in that sense, you can also be a trials rider. And the thing that appeals to me mostly is when it's a little bit out of control, it's a little bit rough. It's an enduro mountain biking as well that I've been doing mostly, and it's just, it feels more natural to me and for my temperament to go get my fix within that sort of realm instead of having it all about being completely in control. And yeah.
Just winding things up here now with a couple of last questions. So who are your favorite sort of visual content creators, and what is it about them that draws you to their work?
That's a good question. I have many different people that I find inspiring for different reasons. I'm 39 now, and I grew up having watched The Long Way Round with Ewan McGregor and Charley Boorman. And I think most people from my generation or older will have seen this. And if you're riding ADV bikes, maybe that was a little spark you kind of got ignited from seeing that. And in the same way, I think for me, another more recent experience that I had before I got my bike was Greg Villalobos from who's now with Adventure Spec. I loved the films that he did with the PR7 when he bought it the first time. He's a great on-camera person. He's very, very likable, and you just feel like he's one of your good mates when you see his videos. I also really enjoy the ones that he's been making for Adventure Spec, where they go to Spain. But there's one that I remember that I watched. I think I've watched it 3 or 4 or 5 times probably. But him and a few mates, some of them from Adventure Spec, went to this little cabin, to his uncle's cabin somewhere. I think uncle's or grandparents' cabin somewhere, and just had a nice weekend ride because they couldn't go to Spain as they planned and during COVID. And I think it was still COVID times when I saw it, and it was the longing for traveling, the longing for getting out on adventures. It was probably partially also something that really sparked something in me that's like, okay, it's really time to get that bike and try and do these adventures. That was kind of revisited by seeing Greg Villalobos' videos. It's not the visual presentation in itself, because Greg Villalobos is also quite good with the camera and shoots a lot of still photography and has done some trying to make some magazines and stuff. But most of it is also GoPro and very raw, but it has a very nice combined feel, and it just feels like a really good group of mates on a good trip, and you're kind of there along for the ride, and you feel like you know these guys. So that's quite inspiring in one way. Then visually, I don't know if there's one single content creator or filmmaker or something. Mark Bone is making documentaries and generally not related to motorcycle documentaries, but he did one documentary about some people riding in, I believe, in Utah, huge cliff jumps, and it was basically an interview session with a friend who was riding there with his friend who accidentally died on that trip they were on. And it was just a beautifully told documentary that happened to be about something with motorcycles. But visually, that was beautifully filmed. It was beautiful the way they had follow shots from the car when they were riding. They had drone shots. They had so many technical advanced shots, and the color grading all out of it was just absolutely beautifully done. So it can be many things that can inspire me to kind of. I think actually, it's a reference that everybody can relate to is Top Gear. It's the best of many worlds, or not the Top Gear that is But the Grand Tour and when Top Gear did those single trips where they went to Africa, or they did these trips where they were quite beautifully filmed, but it was mostly about the camaraderie and the ride and the adventure. And the more you can combine beautiful photography with actually be able to tell the story of good friends that enjoys an adventure and having some amazing experiences, that's what I am trying to key in on and be able to bring the best of both worlds, basically.
And last question, does the filming enhance or diminish the pleasure of the motorcycle ride for you?
I would actually say that it adds another value. It's just like the editing process. For me, it's a joy to try and get up really early to see that sunset. I probably would have just stayed in bed for another hour if I wasn't going up to see that sunset, because I wanted to film it a little bit but the actual experience of seeing that sunset, even though I did it to get up and get a little bit of film for it, is still equally amazing. So you look for opportunities more when you're filming, and therefore you're more observant. Most of the other people from the Balkan trip, for example, for them it was primarily the riding that got them excited. Like, this is really tough terrain, and if we do 250 kilometers today, then we can go here tomorrow, and then maybe we can get to Albania. But then it ended up we couldn't have time to go to Albania. But for them, it was more about the trip, which meant that I think if I hadn't probably been there and said, okay, can we sit down here for 10 minutes and enjoy the landscape? And then in the moment, I don't think they appreciated it a lot, because they were kind of out of the rhythm and they really wanted to get from A to B quite as fast as possible. But probably retrospectively, it's the thing that made us sit down for half an hour and enjoy the landscape was actually the filming. And hadn't there been any filming, we probably just would have plowed through it and not really taken notice in it and stopped and smelled the roses, basically.
Thanks so much for being my guest today, Daniel. Other than your YouTube channel, is there anywhere else people can follow the Scandi Flick online?
Absolutely. I have an Instagram page that I try to update as well, and try to keep as much in the same visual perspective as the YouTube, even though it's two different things. Instagram is very short. It doesn't have the attention span as YouTube does, but I try to visually kind of make sure that the two of them are aligned. So it's a different kind of quick snippet of what the Scandi Flick is. If you want to visit the Instagram, I think the Instagram handle is the Scandi Flick _TV. But otherwise, that's it. I don't have a website with any other sort of purpose. For now, it's just the YouTube channel and the Instagram page to be better, also to be more able to communicate easily with people, because YouTube doesn't have a messaging function. I've been speaking with Nick, for example, from the Project Biker a little bit, and that kind of started through Instagram and not through YouTube, because trying to build up a conversation in the comment field of a video feels quite awkward. So in that sense, Instagram is a really good tool to connect with people on a more personal level than YouTube is. So definitely go check out the Instagram page. And if you want me to ask me any questions, feel free to do it in there. I reply to all my comments. It's not that many, so I can still manage. So feel free to also to put a comment on the videos, or more directly personal to me, you can do it on the Instagram.
Look, great. Thanks very much, Daniel. Thanks for being my guest today. I look forward to seeing future content on the YouTube channel. I wish you great success with it. Take care and ride safe.
Thank you very much, Simon. It was an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I'm very happy for the privilege of you inviting me on this show, and I wish you the best of luck as well.